Hi, I'm Helen McCabe, Managing Director and founder of FW. I began life as a journalist, held senior roles in newspapers, edited Australia's largest magazine, and in 2018, I launched my own business. FW is dedicated to helping women navigate their working lives. But I've made my share of mistakes, especially as a leader. In this series, I go in search of answers to often complex leadership challenges. I explore the latest thinking on how to be a great leader and return to the tried and true methods to better understand what works and in what situations. My guest this week is one of the most scrutinised leaders in the nation. At times, it feels like her decisions are even more hotly debated and discussed than those of a premier. Laura Kane is the Executive General Manager of Football Operations at the AFL. At just 33, she became the first woman to serve as the league's top football official. It's a remarkable achievement. Today, she continues to hold one of the most prestigious football operating roles at the AFL. In this episode, we talk about how Laura navigates scrutiny. How do you make decisions when everyone has an opinion? Plus, stay tuned for Leadership Your Questions Answered straight after the interview. I, along with producer Odessa Blaine, will answer your leadership dilemmas. Laura, welcome to the podcast. To say you've got a big job is a bit of an understatement, but for those of us that are a bit obsessed with AFL, what does your job actually look like? What do you do day to day?
Firstly, thank you for having me. It's varied, my day. It can be different every single day, but I look after football operations, healthcare, and the growth of AFLW and AFLW more broadly here at the AFL. So it's a real mix. It's the fast paced day to day of football operations, running the competitions. We look after all four of our competitions. So, hundreds of decisions a day, all the way through to long-term strategic thinking, big picture. What do we want something to look like in the future? And that can all happen in one single day. So varied. I'm trying to think of a different word for busy. Every day is different.
I remember the first time I met you and something you said really stuck with me and I repeated it. I asked what we could do to help and did anyone have any asks of the FW community? And you said yes, for everyone to go to one AFLW game this year, which was such a good ask, right? And it was such a fun thing to say. So before I kick off with more leadershipy questions, how's AFLW going? And are you getting those crowds that you need to start to see?
Yeah, it's going so well. I'm glad you remembered that. That was the idea. It's so much fun when you go along that, half of our job is just getting people there. And we know that when they get there and they experience it for themselves, they love it and they go back. So crowds are up, which is a really great thing to see. But what we're seeing is a real burst in attendance when we have special event, what we're calling marquee games. So it's going really well. We had our biggest and best season yet, and we hope and we're trying to get as big as we possibly can into the future. And that's part of my new role here on the exec to look after W more broadly. So
Yeah, it must be very gratifying. And then you watch the Matildas that are playing at the moment, and you can sort of get a sense, like if you look into the future, of what this is going to look like. All right, we could probably talk a lot about football, but I will go back to the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, and for our listeners to get a sense of how you've managed your career and landed where you've landed. You started out as a lawyer, and you're now holding one of the most prestigious and sought after roles in one of the most sought after organizations in the country. Can you explain how that career shift happened?
yeah, I mean it's a weird turn of events, to be honest, to go from a personal injury lawyer to working in sports administration. But I was a junior lawyer working on a royal commission. It was really hard work, but really meaningful work. So the Child Abuse Royal Commission, well, more than a decade ago now. But football was my passion, my hobby. I played footy. as a teenager, as a young kid, and I was working and helping the North Melbourne Football Club with their application for an AFLW license, and part of that support of their CEO was trying to find someone to run their women's program. So we spent 3 months together trying to find someone. And couldn't quite find the right person. And he said to me about 3 months later, "What about you do it?" And so it was all a bit of a happy accident, to be honest. And I ended up at North Melbourne for 6 years, working across men's and women's, and now at the AFL for almost five. Whilst it's hard at times, it's a lot of fun. And I love that I've, in maybe the weirdest turn of events, had a career change that, I couldn't imagine doing anything else now.
Yeah, Laura, I think about growing up in a football mad family in a football mad state with a footballer in my family, and it's hard to overstate how much I think of your achievement because it really was the world of men. I mean, I know women have been massive football fans for a long time, but the idea of playing and then becoming an administrator as a woman, even the idea of being a sports commentator as a woman in my days as a journalist in television and newspapers was seen as extremely unlikely and inadvisable. So, an incredible achievement by you. What parts of leadership do you find the easiest?
People. I love building relationships with people, and I was thinking about that before joining you today. Where do I get joy out of leadership? And meeting people, learning about their story, hearing about what drives them. I just love it. And I thought, where do I get that from? And then I thought, my dad has some of his closest friends from the train commute to work. And so he would talk to everybody. And my mum's not dissimilar. So my family are a big group of people who love being present. And I definitely get that from both of them. So I love the opportunity to get to know and learn what makes people tick and why they show up in the way that they do and what drives them.
All right. So, what's the hardest?
I think being in leadership roles require you to make decisions, and the buck stops with you. And often you'll have to take a whole heap of different opinions, data points, and make a decision and make a call. I think for us at the AFL as a collective, that there's probably fewer organisations that are scrutinised or talked about as much as us. So for me, the challenge is how do you make that call, knowing that those calls are public, they're heavily scrutinised, and they're scrutinised rightly so because people care. How do you make those decisions consistently and effectively, and continue to remain true to yourself from a leadership perspective and transparent and authentic at the same time that you know those decisions will be highly scrutinized, good, bad, or otherwise. So that part is always a challenge. Sometimes it's not the actual decision itself, it's the timing, the transparency, the communication that sits around the decision. Sometimes that can be more challenging, and getting caught with the speed in which the public, the fans, the clubs, the stakeholders want you to make a decision, and then the speed in which you need to sort of sometimes slow down to make the best decision. There's so much in that, but it's a day-to-day challenge in our industry, given how much interest there is. But like I said, that's a privilege too. It's a privilege that so many people care about what we
I
decide.
reckon the Treasurer of Australia or the Premier of Victoria has less scrutiny than a a decision that you have to make. So let's talk about scrutiny. How do you manage scrutiny? And was it difficult at first? And is it getting easier now?
You have to keep perspective, and I've said it a couple of times, but you have to remember and keep perspective of the privileged position that we're in to make the decision in the first place. And so to people care, and they love the game so much. And when you love something so much, you are passionate about it. You want to tell people about it. You want to give your opinion. You want to talk about it. You want to unpack it. And so you always have to anchor yourself in that perspective. And then you sort of have to find a new level. Really, you have to find a level of resilience that you didn't have before, a level that you can go to where you can sort of understand that there's that passion and then that interest in the game. Decisions still have to be made. Ultimately, we're the regulator, and sometimes that means you say yes, and sometimes it means you say no. And there I'm referring to our stakeholders, our clubs. for instance. But then you also have the fans, and they care. They care, and so there are a lot of them, which is a really good problem to have, and they have platforms where they can communicate what they think. And so I say to my team often, if we're if we're having a hard week, or there's a lot going on in terms of decisions that we've made, or whatever the case may be, go to the footy and wait for a goal to be scored and just watch the crowd, don't watch the field. That single moment where their team scores, they all just jump up, and you just remember, and can it helps you find that level. It helps you find that different level. It doesn't mean it's not hard, and it doesn't mean it's not a challenge, and you have to sort of learn and grow and navigate your way through things you've literally never dealt with before. But I just find I just go back to that perspective and anchor myself in that, and remember why there is scrutiny, and then you just there's a joy in that too.
Do you assume you're going to get a percentage of people at all times are going to hate the decision you made? And then you've got a percentage of people that are going to be thrilled by it. Do you ever in your head go, all right, if I get 70-30 or 50-50, like is there kind of a percentage that you kind of go, yep, that's not a bad call. I think I nailed that one and I can sleep easier?
Yes, if 100% of people agreed with what we said, I would probably get worried.
I know.
I would probably think, "What's going on here?" And that's just because it's millions and millions of people, and they're all going to have a different view, and most of the time, we're making decisions on their team, and they love their team, and they feel passionately. And much like the example I gave before, I laugh inside at the footy when there's a marking contest and one fan jumps up and says, cheers the mark. The other fan jumps up and says, that's a push in the back. And the other fan jumps up and says, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And often it's only in support of the two teams. It's not often in support of the umpires, but you have every different lens watching the same thing. And so, yeah, 100% I think would probably make me feel uncomfortable if 100% people agreed with what we were doing. So,
All right, I'm gonna finish this podcast by asking you who your favorite player is. So I'm giving you a notification now that I'm gonna finish the podcast on that because I feel like I want to find that out. Back to you. You are in the moment where there is enormous scrutiny, and you've got a very clever framework in which you operate under. What about the personal side of you? Like the pressure is enormous, the stress is huge. It is personal quite often. It's not like you get to make the decision and hide behind the CEO or a board. And where I'm coming to with this question and why I'm asking you this question is I'm looking for you to give people that are struggling with decision making in which they are on the hook for, and how do you move through the emotions and the stress of the scrutiny that you receive when you are kind of on the hook at the end of the day, even though I'm sure it's collaborative, you're kind of on the hook for the decision.
it probably sounds like a cliche answer, but it's not intended to be because it works. I think often if you're under duress or you've had a hard day or you're busy, you go back to basics. So get a good night's sleep, exercise, eat well, make sure you're very purposeful with your day. And that might be that you take time out, 5 minutes, to yourself. Surround yourself with the people that your people, your friends, family, whomever it may be. Somewhat ironically, most of my people like going to the footy for fun, for their
Oh,
downtime.
sure.
But do that. Go along to the footy as a fan. So finding those moments in your week and making sure that you know what works for you. I've reeled off a whole heap of things that I do to sort of reset and ground yourself and be ready to go again the next day, the next week, the next month. But just find what yours are and do them. And I often talk to people who might be having to make big decisions or in the middle of decisions that are complicated and challenging. And you know how it is. Most of the time they say, oh, I had a bad sleep and I haven't exercised for a couple of days and I haven't done all the things that actually center me and ground me and make me feel good. So I just try and go back to basics. and then spend time doing things that you like. I just happen to turn the thing that I love doing as a hobby into my job, so I've got to find a way to sort of show up as two different people sometimes.
Do you read your press or your social media or not, and I'm noting that it doesn't have to be about you personally, but do you engage in what is being said about the decision making or the AFL Commission or the game, given the scope of the commentary, or do you try and switch off from it altogether?
No, you definitely do. We have processes in place here. We need to know what people think. We need to know what the sentiment is. We do a lot of public media, and to ensure that we're not walking into questions or conversations that we're not aware of, you have to stay up to date with what's going on. So we have processes here to make sure we see what's most relevant and important to us. I don't often engage in the comment section of social media, and I have a very small profile on social media, and that's on purpose. And that's just to not get caught up in the sort of the comments and the loop that can sort of occur there. But absolutely take notice of what's being said and how people feel and what they're asking us to do. But I also engage in different types of media. Our fan channels, our, let's call it, new age media on social media, who have enormous followings on their Instagram or their TikTok accounts, and they talk about different things too. So I try to stay up to date with both the more traditional media and then also what's happening sort of on the ground, if you like. And sometimes their views are the same and sometimes they're not. So yeah, I definitely engage in it. I just I probably keep a low profile from a social media perspective and just have my close friends on that.
Tell me, whenever you go into a new job or into a new team, is there a sort of a culture that bothers you? Is there sort of like, a habit of teams that you kind of go, not on my watch? That really irks me and I'm gonna stamp it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not a cultural piece. It's probably more a way of working, which I appreciate can turn into culture. But I really like working in a collaborative environment. So learning that from clubland, where you have no choice, you are a team, and you rely on each other and you play different roles, all of you on the field, off the field. But by virtue of my role here across AFLW, health and football operations, we impact everyone. Our decisions impact everyone. And so siloed operating is just not my style. That I don't like, and I like consistency. People rely on us as leaders to show up in a particular way, and I say often, be really consistent in the way that you show up and your style, and make sure people know what to expect from you as a person, from Laura, the leader. But be inconsistent in your ideas and in the best way possible. Bring different ideas. Don't always just say the same thing. Think about different things. Read, learn, and so inconsistent in a positive way, because it's usually meant negatively, which I understand the definition of, but be really bold and different in your thinking and create that feeling in a meeting where people say, "Oh, I haven't thought about that," or "Where did they learn that from?" Or that thought that you're progressive and you're different and you're not just gonna come with the same ideas every single day.
And do you take responsibility for being the person with the bold ideas, or do you take responsibility for creating the environment for people to come forward with ideas?
Both, both. I think I don't have all of the ideas. I don't have all of the bold ideas, and I'm very purposeful in the team that I set up around me. I need people that are better than me, and I need people that uh, think differently and are creative. And we have everything from healthcare experts in my team to football operations, business leaders, creatives, marketing. I've got a really broad mix of direct reports if I think about it just like that. And that's on purpose because I don't have all of those skills. No one can have all of those skills. So for me, it's about setting up a team that are different to me but all driven by the same goal. So, but yeah, occasionally I need to come up with a bold idea.
Um, Talk to me about consistency then. Does that come naturally to you, or is that something that you've evolved or worked on because you believe that gets the best out of people?
I think it's a bit of a mix. I think often if people are describing me, they'll talk about that I'm pragmatic and calm, and I think that actually is consistency. It's that you're showing up in a particular way that's measured and the same and predictable. So, I think for me, it's important to try and create an environment that people feel safe in, and safe, I mean safe for, those bold ideas sometimes to be shot down, or those bold ideas sometimes to not be so bold or liked, and sometimes the opposite is true, that people love them, but you have to create a safety in that. But I've also that's learnt behavior too. In my first job as a personal injury lawyer, I was listening to, some of the hardest, most personal stories, and often with people that were highly distressed, and rightly so. It was really important for me to be calm and absorb that stress, not add to it. So that's sort of a learning that you have, and then I go to the North Melbourne Football Club, and you're literally winning and losing, each week. We had a lot of change, from a leadership perspective, and then we had COVID, and I was in the hub for the better part of 100 days, going thinking we were going for 2 weeks. So I was forced to find a way to respond and show up consistently, even though there was change, and even though there was, things happening around us that we couldn't control, which I know applied to everyone. But you just learn how do you create a steadiness in the chaos.
So Laura, who's made a difficult decision that's gone down well, in that all of those blogs and in every media commentary and every FAM radio station, and Laura, who's made a decision that's gone down really badly and is, the, the subject of all manner of commentary. Are they different people when you come into work the next day, or are you the same person?
No, I'm the same person. I was just about to say, if you can find one of those really positive blogs, I'll jump online and start reading comments. But no, I'm the same person, and you learn every time you make a decision. And it's not that I'm the same person. I'm the same Laura that turns up to work every day, but I'm thinking about the response, the reaction, what happened there, what could we have done better? Was it me? Was it others in my team? How can I help people, make different, better, faster responses? Or how can we actually reflect on, because what we don't often do is stop and say, hey, we did a pretty good job there. That was pretty good. That was a really good contribution, and see how that all played out. That's how we want things to land, or that's how we want to make decisions. And so it's also celebrating the wins, and we can so quickly rush to the things that we need to improve and do better. But sometimes you don't see the benefit until years later. And the end of last year, the very last round of the year, sitting at the MCG, watching our two female boundary umpires debut as the first ever women to be boundary umpires in men's games, I stopped and I thought, this is pretty cool. And this took years. This took years and years and years. And so sometimes we zoom past those moments really quickly. And I think at every single time I walk into an AFLW game, we have 540 women playing across all of our 18 clubs. We're the largest employer of female athletes in the country. And every time I walk through the gates of Icon Park or Henson Park or Springfield or Alberton, and in particular when I see little boys with W jumpers on, I just think sometimes we've got to stop and say, hey, this is good. We've done a good job here. We as a collective.
Yeah, I agree. When you see little boys with their favorite female sports star, it's pretty. And I think I've made that point a couple of times in this podcast. Never in my lifetime did I think women would be getting bigger ratings than men in sports. What's the best piece of feedback you've received in your career?
This is a hard one because I've received so many little one-liners. I write them down too, so you should do that. I have a notes section in my phone where I write little one-liners down so I don't forget them. Someone who was a leader of mine said the data is one thing, but the anecdotal evidence is overwhelming. And I always think about it that sometimes, even though computer says yes, people might say no. And even though something is supported by numbers and data, how people feel or the way that a decision makes them feel is as important as what the numbers say. And so sometimes to be ambitious, and have certainty in something can very easily be supported by data and numbers and facts and figures. But sometimes people don't feel good about it. So I always think about that when we're looking at spreadsheets and data and numbers, and it might be screaming off the page that it needs to be changed or the right thing to do, but you might have to slow down to get to the right answer because it won't make people feel good.
I always think about that in the context of an HR problem. And HR processes are designed after years and years and years of perfecting something. And so there is this system, but it actually never applies to individual personalities and almost always makes everyone in the process feel worse. And I think about that quite often. I'm a bit interested because I've been hearing a little bit about how artificial intelligence is starting to be viewed in AFL. How's it looking from your vantage point?
Yeah, it's really good. So, speaking of strong female leaders, Beck Hagsma is our EGM of Customer, Commercial, and Technology. And she's come to us from TV, and was working on the Olympics. And she is amazing. And she has taught me so many things about AI and the opportunities. From a footy perspective, we've been talking about AI for a number of years at optical tracking or ball chip technology, or how we can use predictive modeling or AI just to help code our games. Just so many different ways. So, I was lucky enough a couple of years ago to spend some time over in the States and to see how they're using AI as it relates to injury prevention and management and the physical movement of players, and looking at, the way that technology could support our efforts in concussion or other physical injuries, is something that we're, always looking at and learning about. So I've learned so much about technology, and what AI could do and is doing for our game. And, it's not going anywhere. It's not going away. So it's just finding that balance between the computer and the person, and how do we help people do their jobs better, with technology. That's what we're looking at the AFL.
Anyone who's followed the FW brand for a while will know that Beck Hagsman left the board of FW, Laura, to join the AFL. So I know what a talent
She did.
what a talent she is. Any advice for young female leaders listening today who have kind of admired what you've achieved so far, and clearly you've got much more to give, but are interested to hear a little bit about your journey?
Yeah. So the number one thing when I speak to young female leaders that they talk to me about or ask me questions about is they don't want to ask a silly question. Just ask the silly question, because it's not silly. Because if you're thinking it, you are just like the young or more senior male leaders, that they are thinking about different things in the context of your meeting, your decision, your plan, whatever it is. And most of the time, someone else has thought about that question. So just ask it. Invite yourself to things. I invite myself everywhere. People aren't thinking about inviting you to things, and they most certainly aren't purposefully thinking about leaving you out of things. So just ask, can I come to that? Can I join that? Can I sit here? Can I do this? The worst thing that could happen is that they say no, and that's not very bad. So just ask, and push yourself forward. And then the last thing for me is, if you're in a position where you are at the table, so to speak, don't change. Don't turn into everybody else at the table, because you're there to be different. And most of the time the organization wants you to be different, and to provide them with a diverse range of thinking and skill sets and ideas. And I just watch sometimes people try to women, and young female leaders try to turn into or mimic the people around them. And if they are men, or young up and coming male leaders, they have unbelievably good qualities too. And so imagine what a team would look like if we all brought different things to the table and we stayed true to ourselves. So you use much less energy being yourself.
Have you ever been invited yourself to things and been told no?
Hardly ever.
I would have thought so. It's just such a great piece of advice. It's such an excellent piece of advice. Invite yourself to things. Um, okay, I promise it's going to finish on a question, and I acknowledge that you're going to have two answers most likely: an AFLW player and an AFL player. So I know you've already figured that out. Tell me your favorite AFL player to watch.
I was thinking about that the whole time we were doing the interviews. I was thinking, what position am I going to go for? Who am I going to
See, that's
say,
very mean of me, isn't it?
Jake
It's mean of me to actually do that to
that's good.
you.
Jake Waterman from West Coast is my favourite male player. And my favourite, I think you're gonna ask me my favourite female player is Emma Carney.
Awesome way to end this podcast. Laura Kane, congratulations on your spectacular career. Best of luck with the season this year, particularly AFLW season. Thank you for making the time to talk to me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, we've had someone who manages a lot of Gen Z staff members write in. They say that they're struggling to have their Gen Z staff speak up at meetings, and they want to know if you have any tips or advice on how to motivate these early career team members to bring their ideas to the table.
Really interesting question. I think probably I'm more interested in your answers than mine, Odessa, but I'm going to talk from experience. At FW, we have a morning meeting every day. It's 15 minutes. It's on screen. Everyone's expected to turn up, and everyone knows that they could be asked at any time to talk about what their priorities are for the day or the week, or on a Friday. And this might be helpful to anyone who's struggling with this. We ask them what their win of the week was, or if they want to acknowledge someone in the team that has gone out of their way to help them. So I find that if you set up a formal arrangement where coming off mute or being asked to speak in a team meeting that is pretty light touch is a great way to get young female future leaders to get comfortable with the idea of using their voice in a work setting. But I do acknowledge that this is a tough area. You know, I often talk, as you know, that when I say, "Hey, Odessa, can you give so and so a call?" The Gen Z staff member will think, not saying you, will think, "Oh, sure, I'll just send them a quick email." And I think you've actually picked up the phone and actually you've sent an email. So it is a constant challenge, I think, for leaders in their late 50s and beyond to relate to Gen Z future leaders. But perhaps you might be able to answer that question more accurately.
I think, and this might seem like I'm stating the obvious a bit, but every young Gen Z staff member is different. And so for some, doing those regular low stakes opportunities is excellent, and having positive feedback, positive reinforcement. I think some as well can benefit a bit from being thrown into the deep end. I think I did earlier on in my career. I was in a news environment where I had to pitch articles regularly in every morning meeting, and I learnt from that. And I think also creating a space where they can see the meaning of their work and not just feel like they're being made to give a point for the sake of it.
So, in summary, what we're saying is find ways for them to talk that is incidental. It's a bit like incidental exercise. Give them opportunities to speak about their weekend, something that's gone well for them, and get used to using their voice. Make sure you create an environment where the Gen Z worldview is actually encouraged. Like, we want to hear what they have to say. And Odessa, you make the point that no two Gen Z employee is the same. So
Some love a phone call.
some love a phone call. Do they really love a phone call?
I prefer a
Yeah.
phone call.
Yeah.
But that's definitely.
Okay. I get terrified ringing people these days.
We usually just get voicemail.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I just hang up.
So we've had a new manager write in with little supervising experience. They have an employee who is burnt out. They say this employee constantly says that they have too much on their plate, but they seem reluctant to delegate or share the load. They say they've given them advice on time management skills and how to better plan tasks and projects, but they don't take it. Do you have any tips, Helen, for what they should do next?
Yes, I do. They don't get to call the shots. You actually have a duty of care if they're constantly telling you about burnout. So I would recommend delegate for them. Ask questions to try and find out what is behind this attitude. I've talked in other episodes about martyrs in the workplace and how to manage a workplace martyr. But have a sit down and an honest conversation and get them to open up as to what is going on. See what is the underlying fear or perfectionism. This does sound like someone who might suffer from perfectionism, but it could also be understaffing. So you might have an issue in that particular area of the organization. And also, is it, you might just be a fear of missing targets, and the targets might have been ambitious targets or might not be as relevant to the business as they think they are. So you could shift the targets and make simple changes to make that employee's life easier. In short, have a heart to heart, have a chat to them. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. It was produced by Odessa Blaine, Susan Warby, and led by Paddy Andrews.